in terms of kind of intellectual engagement, sophisticated things to think about, I don't think any of you are challenged in that regard. Plenty of things to read, plenty of things to listen to. I think where you might be challenged is focusing in this way that we've just been focusing. How do you commit to the practices that will actually help you to have more well-being and more peace? So that's, I think, a challenge for people who live in modern urban situations. But human beings are dynamic, creative, intelligent things. So when you have a challenge, it's often the case that you can overcome it if you really want to. But the question is, how do we get in touch with that feeling of really wanting to? And then how do you take care of that feeling? So if I'm just going to offer some suggestions about what I think I would do if I was a layman in Melbourne, I don't think I'd ever turn the television on, for one thing. Because the television, a very distractive thing, hypnotic kind of a thing that somewhat entertaining, but the longer you watch it, the more dull your mind gets. And so your mindfulness isn't in your body when you're watching the television, it's with the television, and there's all these things happening. Energy's coming out of your body and you're not in the present moment very much. So I think in terms of your mindfulness practice, television is very harmful. Not only that, the quality of the entertainment on television now is actually you'll hear a lot of irreverent humour. Modern world doesn't hold things up and revere and love. It's a lot of sarcasm, a lot of cynicism, a lot of violence, a lot of aggressive sexuality. So you're looking at the television, that's what you're getting. You're getting cynicism, irreverence, bad news, aggression, sex, a lot of violence. So that's not helpful. It distracts the mind, it entertains the mind, but it agitates the mind. So I think my grandmother used to call it the idiot box. So my grandmother had wisdom, but she did watch it. I'm not sure what that says. No, it's interesting about the different combinations of merit that beings have, and the actual challenge of having a lot of merit, because I think people here have a lot of merit. But you also have your karmic challenge. So Ajahn Anan once said to me, there's Central Thai people tend to have a kind of a vanity or a superiority complex compared to North East Thai people. North East Thai people, the farmers, the rice farmers with less education. Central Thai people, more of an education and more office jobs, more factory jobs, that kind of thing. And the North East Thai people, often labourers. And Ajahn Anan, he once said something to me one day, and it surprised me. He said, you know what, the people of North East Thailand have better karma than the people of Central Thailand. Oh, really? So yeah, he used the word vasana, which is like karmic imprints. And he said he was talking about in relationship to the Buddhisasana, in terms of the Buddhist teachings. He said the people of North East Thailand have a deeper connection with the Buddhist teachings than the people of Central Thailand. I think if you told the people of Central Thailand that, they would be surprised. There's a kind of a conceited assumption that they're better, and of course they're making merit in various ways. But what he was talking about was the level of faith and the quality of faith that the people in North East Thailand had traditionally. And then he pointed out the fact that most of last century's arahants came from North East Thailand. That's very interesting because they had a more difficult life and with less education. But what it meant was they had certain qualities of patient endurance and a strong quality of faith, so that when they came to practice and meet Luang Por Man was this great wandering ascetic monk, And so they're already used to a very simple diet, and they're already used to a difficult life, kind of ploughing the fields behind the buffalo and putting the rice in and harvesting the rice and weaving baskets. And so because they'd already had hardship and difficulty and not particularly fine food, when they had to live on alms food and when they had to sleep under trees and in caves, it wasn't that difficult, and many of them got great results. So it's interesting to see that this close connection with probably having meditated a lot in past lives. I had the merit to be born in a place close to many meditation masters. About 30 or 40 years ago in North East Thailand, there were arahants in many provinces, and the people of Thailand would travel around and visit several arahants, several masters, several monasteries, and the people of Bangkok would come and they would make their merit, and they would feel sorry for the poor people of North East Thailand. But the poor people of North East Thailand were very diligent with their chanting and their meditation. And so it's interesting how you get these interesting combinations where I believe the people of Melbourne do have some very auspicious karmic connection, because we're just looking recently, Ajahn Chah just passed through, very good monk. Ajahn Sumedho just passed through. And every year it seems that you have some very good monks passing through. And I don't think that's the case, even in places like London and Paris, New York. You don't know this. This is the problem with human beings, is we take things for granted. And we always need to remember a broader context and see things. Sometimes we need someone else to point it out to us. But there aren't many cities in the Western world where you have the greatest meditation masters of the day passing through regularly. So this has a karmic cause, probably having paid respects to enlightened masters in previous lives, with great faith and with respect. A bunch of you are here in Melbourne, you have the auspicious karmic causes that allow these beings to come. These beings can't just come because they want to come. The beings where they're going need the merit to meet them. So I'm just kind of saying a few things in terms of what I wanted to help you to recognize, and then and ask you, what can you do to focus? I don't know about you, but my sense for the future of the human realm at this particular point in time, it looks like it might get a bit more difficult for most people. And so it's not I might be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but having a look at some of the phenomena that seem to be occurring, I've heard many rumors that there's going to be some economic difficulties, global financial slowdown. What does that mean? What does it mean to have less money? What does it mean to have more unemployment? Could mean a lot more time to meditate. Could mean less wasted time shopping. Could have some good consequences. But in general, if you, I don't know, you might not share the sense that I have, but if you do share that sense, if you have the sense that in the future things might be difficult, if I was you, I would be getting very interested in developing my inner resources. So that if I knew I had to face some difficulties, I would have an inner refuge there and some inner strength. So I wouldn't be thinking in terms of how can I distract myself and fulfill my sensual desires to the maximum degree while I still can. Because then if that's like addiction, and when you get separated from the substance that you're addicted from, you tend to get upset. So I would be thinking in terms of how can I cut back on consumerism, how can I cut back on entertainment, how can I establish a sense of having an inner refuge so that if things do get more difficult, you'll be able to roll with the punches, as it were. There's another little story I just wanted to mention. There's a man who's moved in front of our monastery recently called Mike, a Canadian man. He used to work with the United Nations. semi-retired. He told me an interesting story. He had a daughter, and about 20 years ago, and his daughter was 2 weeks old, and she was sleeping on his lap. And she actually died right there in his lap while he was nursing her. And it turned out that she had a leaking heart, a very small leak that they hadn't detected. And he tried to resuscitate her, and she didn't come back to life. And he had a very interesting response to this. I mean, obviously a terrible situation for a new parent. He very much loved his new daughter. Her name was Jennifer. And he said for about 2 weeks he had this experience of, why did this happen? Why me? Why did this happen? Why? Terrible, terrible grief. And after 2 weeks he had a different experience. He woke up and he had a feeling, why not me? And the grief was gone. And now some people with that very same experience could have become bitter and sad and cursed and carry this around for a lifetime. And he had this experience of 2 weeks, and he had what is actually quite an obvious insight, that this actually happens. It's not as uncommon as we might think. And it's like when the Buddha says, when we're born we walk with death. And so that death can come at any time. And so for some people it's in the womb, some people it's as young children, some people get to be adults, some people get to be old. But this kind of phenomena of beings dying from, many people have miscarriages. It doesn't get talked about so much, it's not so visible. But it's quite a common experience. My mother had miscarriages, two of my sisters had miscarriages, so you have fetuses dying even before they're born. And then this young baby died at 2 weeks. But Mike had this heart-opening response after 2 weeks, and he had this wisdom response. So that would seem to suggest previous practice, having contemplated impermanence and having accepted it on some fundamental level. And the result was, it opened his heart to the fact of suffering and to the fact of impermanence and to the fact of these horrible things that occur in many places, and became a more compassionate person with a greater empathic connection to human beings, rather than a grieving, sad person who felt sorry for himself. I think it's a very interesting example, isn't it, of the ways we can respond to tragedy. And I was very happy, very touched when he told me that story. And to this day he still thanks her. He thanks Jennifer for coming into his life and teaching him, helping him to open his heart in that way. I think he did go on to have other kids, did he, Ajahn? Yeah, and he's got a wife with a couple of kids as well, so yeah. So my dad, speaking about death and impermanence, Ajahn Achalo, basically, if you come to an Ajahn Achalo talk, there's going to be metta and death. Pretty well guaranteed. And they're kind of balancing contemplations, they're both very important. So my father, consequence of smoking cigarettes a packet a day for 40 years. Mel was diagnosed with lung cancer 3 years ago, and he had some chemotherapy and some radiation, and he was able to extend his life without much symptoms until now. And so I'm going up to see my dad in a couple of weeks, and he's been given 3 months now, 3 months by his doctors. So this is pertinent for me now, because we contemplate it, don't we? We contemplate that death is inevitable. We don't know when the moment of death is, but when it's your own dad, and when when the doctor's given it a time frame, it becomes, oh, okay, that's more serious. So, having been born, we live for a period of time. Things change. We die. So one of the reasons we do the death contemplation is it helps us in this realm of focus. So when we think of someone like Jennifer dying at 2 weeks, it reminds us that we can't take it for granted that we'll get to live to be 80 or 90. And the other thing I hope it stimulates is that question, what do I want to be thinking when I die? And what inner resources will I have available when I die? So that will depend upon how you lived your life and also how much you meditated when you were alive. And I was talking on Thursday about the practice of mindfulness and about the importance of just putting the effort even if you can't see particularly amazing results. This is one of the tricks, or one of the biggest challenges in Buddhist practice, is that especially with modern people who have short attention spans and desire for quick gratification, is that you meditate and you want more peace than you get more quickly, and you're not satisfied with the results of your meditation. And you don't realize, most people don't realize that just to have some more space from your thoughts, some more space from your pain, and just to be aware that you're thinking and to be aware that there's pain is actually a much better situation than sitting in front of the computer or playing on your tablet. Because it's these moments where you're able to separate and take a bit more space from your thoughts and a bit more space from your feeling, and just to see that you might be upset about something. When you come to meditate, you actually see that's feelings. Those are mental feelings. Rather than be completely in the reaction or the justification of why you feel something or why someone shouldn't have done something, and we get completely absorbed in the head and believing the thoughts. But when you come to meditate, even if there's a bit of a wrestle there, a lot of thinking, painful feelings in the heart, and you think, I haven't got anywhere with my meditation, but actually seeing thoughts as thoughts, and that which can see these things is mindfulness. That's what you need when you're dying, because when you get to that point where the body is kind of dissolving or it's not functioning, the vital organs aren't functioning very well anymore, and the breath is getting more challenged and there's more pain, that training, whatever capacity you have developed to be able to see a feeling as a feeling, to see a thought as a thought, to be able to bear with pain without adding the added suffering of aversion. So as Buddhist monks, we get to visit people who are unwell and in hospital and approaching death with some frequency. And you can see that people who meditate a lot generally do better with their experience of aging and death than people who don't. And so I suppose the modern response is, if someone's having too much of a hard time, is they just give more morphine. And a lot of the reason they do that is they don't want the people around them to be upset by the fact that they seem upset. So they just make them stoned, basically. And it's mostly for the relatives. Now, it's not a very good situation when you're thinking of leaving this body and going to your next birth to be drunk. It's a terrible situation, actually. So, when you come, and this is the thing about focus and perspective, and this is where the short attention span and impatience is such a harmful thing. And I just kind of want to mirror back to you that even if you sit for half an hour and it's just thinking and just painful feelings, making that effort for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour a day is tremendously helpful and valuable. Because that's what's going to give you the mental integrity and clarity when things get worse. What happens when there's more physical pain? What happens when there's more mental pain? And if you've practiced bearing with it with some patient endurance. The other thing is, it's not just bearing with it with patient endurance, it's remembering the Buddha, it's remembering his teachings, it's remembering your aspiration. That's what you came to sit for. And you have this daily practice of recollecting those things. Because ideally when we come to die, the best thing is if you can recollect the good things that you've done throughout your life. with some with some happiness and with some confidence. So the various good karma that you've made, this is another reason we consciously make good karma. It's an investment in our capacity to be able to go with a happy mind. So think about the good things that you've done. But we need to be able to imagine you're experiencing a lot of pain, and the part of the mind just is very agitated, wants to get very upset or very depressed. But what you need to bring to that situation is a conscious recollection, a conscious reflection of things that you did that were good. So obviously the mind's going to need a certain amount of integrity and a capacity to reflect, even when things aren't comfortable. So that's why I think just sitting with pain, a little bit of pain, and sitting with restlessness and sitting with thinking is tremendously valuable, because it's training your mind to be able to be with things when they're not comfortable, and to have enough integrity to be able to reflect in a skillful way. So as we approach our death, hopefully, if we've been fairly generous, and if we've trained with the ethical precepts, and if we've meditated, when we look back on that life, we can feel good about it. And there was a situation a few years ago, I told this story many years ago in Melbourne. I was in Ladakh with a friend, and Ladakh was experiencing unseasonal thunderstorms, actually. It never rains in Ladakh, it only snows, and then that snow slowly melts. So Ladakh is these huge mountains of dust and rocks piled extremely high, and when it snows and the snow gently melts, that's not a problem. But if it rains all of a sudden, you get mud slides going down these huge mountains. And so we were just a couple of kilometers away from where there'd been a mudslide the night before. I think 200 people had died in their sleep, covered in mud. And so we were in this place called Leh, Ladakh, and it was raining again. And people were running around what to do, and they all wanted to go into the center of town and see what the leaders of the community would say to do. And so my friend said, "Come on, we should go." They're saying we should go. And I said, "I'm not going anywhere." He said, "Why not?" And I'm like, "You're in a valley surrounded by very, very high mountains in every direction. You actually don't know which one is going to become the mudslide." And I said to him, "You go to the top of the mountain, that might be the mountain that slides down the hill. You're at the bottom of the mountain." It's like, basically, I'm going to sit here and meditate and be ready to die if that's what it comes to. And then everybody where we were staying said, "Okay, if the monk's staying, we'll stay too." But I went and I was sitting in front of my shrine, and what came up for me was a sense of, I'm really grateful for my life. And I'm really happy to have done the things I've been able to do. And if I have to die now, it's okay. And I was very happy to see that. And that's partly the result of when you're a monk, you're forced to have quite a high level of virtue. But also because of possibly some previous good karma, I have been able to pay respects to people that I believe are arhants. Paid respects to His Holiness the Dalai Lama many times, been on pilgrimage, and also having led other people in wholesome things. I led other people on pilgrimage, led retreats. There's a sense of, at that time, I was 38, and there really was a sense, okay, if I have to die now, I can die. I'm grateful for this life. It was a good life, actually. And so the reason I mention that is a kind of to ask you, what can you do? You can ask yourself, what are the activities that you do that you feel pleased to be associated with, so that if you're on holiday in Ladakh and the mudslide's coming, that you feel okay about your life. So this is a wonderful thing about the death reflection, is it makes us think about, what are we doing? And what do I want to be thinking? What kind of life do I want to look back at? When it's time to pop your clogs, as they say, or kick the bucket. I think it's Australians say kick the bucket. The British say pop your clogs. So I feel a little bit of frustration in relationship with my father, because I don't feel that I've been able to teach him very much about how to keep his mind bright and how to recollect the good things that he did. Even I've been a bhikkhu for 20 years, and I've got some disciples in many parts of the world. Many people see me as one of their teachers, and there's that frustration of I haven't been able to help my dad much. And it's not necessarily because I didn't try. But I think it's not easy for parents to listen to their children sometimes. One of my dad's big challenges was that he had almost perfect health for most of his life. And I've been telling him for decades, Dad, you're going to get old, things are going to change. And he would say, I can do everything I could do when I was 40 today. So we didn't hear the suggestion that this is going to change, Dad. He'd say, no, I can do everything. I've never had a cold in my life. Okay. But Dad, this is going to change. May I have another beer? So, and I was trying, you say, why do you have to talk about this? It's depressing, mate. That kind of response. So, and then of course, all of a sudden, he's got the lung cancer and he's got a bit of dementia. And so the frustrating thing is he doesn't actually have the mental faculty now to learn about how to reflect on his life. And he hasn't developed the patient endurance to be okay with it, with a bit of anxiety. And so it's a difficult situation. Well, yesterday I was leading a guided meditation and I got 60 or so people who were doing that meditation to dedicate merit to Dad, and I'll be doing the same thing when I lead the 9-day retreat next week. What you can do is you can't take on people's karma, but you can add merit to the situation. And I do know some very gifted masters in Thailand, so at that moment of death I'll be calling them, asking them if they can lend some assistance to help him have. But he was a moral man, he was an ethical person. And but I think the other factor with my dad is that he was a commercial fisherman for 2 years. And so there was this killing a lot of fish. And you imagine the experience of fish when they're being pulled out of the ocean. There's that gasping for oxygen because they need the water to pass through their mouths and gills to get the oxygen, and they're out of the oxygen. There's that sense of gasping. And so I think Dad, because one of the things I do when I go to India and meditate for 300 hours, 400 hours, dedicating merit to my dad, may he die peacefully, may he have a auspicious rebirth. And there's that sense of Dad has to work through some karma first, because you can't take away the karma of having killed many thousands of beings. But what you can do is you can spread loving kindness, you can generate merit, you can dedicate the merit, and I believe it has an effect on some level, and especially at the moment of death, if there's a certain amount of merit there. Merit is a thing. It's a potent force. It's a thing. It's a subtle thing. It's not as obvious as a table or a microphone, but it is a thing. And you dedicate merit, something that you're sharing, that thing, that phenomena does help beings. So some of the great monks of Thailand visit England, and they've told me that England is just full of ghosts. They say because the English people don't have a habit, they don't know how to generate merit for and then transfer the merit for their deceased relatives. He said, but in Thailand, somebody dies and they call the monks and they make merit for 3 days before they burn the body. That's a tradition. So if there is any kind of confused wandering around consciousness, if that consciousness knows how to rejoice in the merit, people are transferring the merit, then that consciousness can move to a next life. But anyway, a few reflections on life and death. And I just want to encourage you to please try to do some daily meditation practice at home. This simple breath meditation is a very profound practice, and mindfulness that you develop from it is really quite extraordinary. Lord Buddha said breath meditation is a crown jewel of the meditation methods. And what I was talking about on Thursday was this sense of we can underestimate the value of things when it's a subtle thing. But these subtle things, when you do them over a longer period of time, actually become very powerful things. So ordinary mindfulness, if you're committed to doing your meditation, becomes good mindfulness, and good mindfulness becomes profound mindfulness, and profound mindfulness is a quality that contributes significantly to liberating beings from delusion. So we have to try to commit to it, even though it might not seem that it gives great results now. It's an incredible investment in your future sanity, well-being, happiness, clarity. Very important. And in the introduction to the Anapanasati Sutta, Lord Buddha says that in cultivating breath meditation, you actually can fulfill the four foundations of mindfulness. So in trying to just to be aware of breath, you see, you become aware of mental feelings, you become aware of physical feelings, you become aware of mind states, because it's all occurring in the same space. And in fulfilling, so just trying to be aware of the breath, you become aware of many things. You become aware of your habits, you become more clear of your habits, and you become more mature. You can see some habits are immature, and you can actually attenuate them, modify them, cultivate them, and begin to notice the way you are, the way you affect others, and you begin to be able, just through this act of paying more attention and being more in the present moment, you learn what is skillful, what isn't skillful, and what to abandon, what to cultivate. In the introduction to Anapanasati Sutta, it also says in cultivating the four foundations of mindfulness, you bring to completion the 7 factors of enlightenment. So qualities like investigating into Dhamma, you have a look, what's going on, what is it? And then also things like rapture and tranquility, and then concentration arise when the mindfulness gets better and the concentration gets deeper, and then equanimity. And then it's a really wonderful paragraph. It says, and in developing those 7 factors of enlightenment, the mind is liberated. It goes boom, boom, and it's like, wow, it's the kind of thing. And then the rest of the sutta goes on for a few more pages, but I love the first paragraph. It's so simple. Practice breath meditation, you'll develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. In developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, you bring to completion the 7 factors of enlightenment. Bring to completion the 7 factors of enlightenment, you will be enlightened. So I leave you with that reflection.